Good evening, fellow creeps. For tonight's story, when the radio began whispering random numbers through static, I thought to myself, maybe it was just faulty equipment, until I felt something else. Once again, welcome to Creepy with Coffee, where true horror stories come to life, one eerie sip at a time. Tonight, we are taking you deep into the heart of Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, where a work trip turns into a chilling encounter at a hotel with a dark, silent reputation. A routine night filled with Facebook scrolling and fast food slowly unravels into an experience so terrifying it left one man refusing to ever take the lift again. Before we go to the story, like usual, if you have yet to do so, please help me subscribe to the channel. It would help the channel a lot. And if you have done so, if you still have a little bit of time, why not leave some nice words down in the comment section below. If you have done all that, now let's get on to the story.
This is Creepy with Coffee.
My name is Hasman, a private sector employee. This incident happened when I stayed overnight at a hotel in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, for a work assignment. I landed at Kota Kinabalu International Airport at around 6:30 p.m. For those unfamiliar, or for those from West Malaysia, in Kota Kinabalu, 6:30 p.m. it's already Maghrib. By 7 p.m., it would have turned dark. By the time I reached the hotel lobby, it was already 7:30 p.m. After checking in, I went up to my room, which is on 11th floor. That night, I planned to just chill in the room, go online, scroll on my social media, watch some YouTube, maybe read a local horror fiction site. I had already bought dinner, a takeaway KFC from the airport. The plan was to sleep early since I had a morning meeting the next day. After showering and praying, I opened my laptop as usual at the desk, but the Wi-Fi was terribly slow. I could still scroll Facebook or read the horror fiction, but streaming YouTube music, forget it. It was buffering endlessly. But then there was a built-in radio on the bedside. So I switched it on just to have noises in the room. If I'm not mistaken, I tuned into a local radio station at the time, which I shall not name it here. About an hour later, while I was scrolling Facebook and was just looking at stuff on my phone, the music from the radio suddenly stopped. I grumbled to myself, this hotel can't even maintain the radio properly, but still charges so much. What was once a room filled with music now felt eerily silent. Well, I didn't bother turning on the TV because I was too lazy to reach for the remote, so I ignored it and just kept staring back at my laptop. Not long after that, the previously muted radio started emitting static. You know the kind of buzzing when you hear from a broken radio, or it's like nothing is on the radio, that's static. I was in the middle of reading a horror story on my laptop and was super engrossed, so I just ignored the static. It was already past 9 p.m. at this point. After a while, I realized my hearing was starting to dull. It was as if the radio static was affecting my ears. Every sound seemed slowed down. Even the static now sounded like it was far away, faint and distant. Then, within that static, I started to hear what sounded like voices, like someone was speaking through the static. I thought maybe the radio was coming back. You know how when you were trying to adjust the radio and between static and channel, sometimes you hear like voices? I thought it was that. And the DJ was rambling again and whatnot. But given how muffled my hearing had become, I focused hard on the sound and realized the voice was reciting numbers, random ones. Like, this is an example. what the hell? Is this lottery numbers or what? Suddenly, out of nowhere, I felt like someone was covering my ears from behind. You know, like when you are sitting and someone was standing behind you and they cup their hand on your ears? It felt like that. A hand pressing over them. My hair stood on end. I jumped out of the chair and immediately looked behind me. But I was alone in the room. There was no one else. I rubbed my ears hard. But then the sensation was gone. Trying to calm myself down, I convinced myself it was probably just in my head. Maybe the static had made my ears go numb, even though that explanation didn't make much sense. I immediately went to switch off the broken radio and I sat back at the desk. At that point, I turned on all the lights in the room. Well, what would you do, right? Then I tried YouTube again and it worked. So I started watching some funny comedy clips. I was laughing silently, but my mind was on high alert. You know how YouTube sometimes goes black for a second before the next video starts? Well, during one of those black screens, I kid you not, I saw the shadow of a face. Yes, a shadow of a face, like a person bent down standing right next to me, like they were watching the video with me. I immediately flung my laptop to the side. I'm telling you, I clearly saw it. This wasn't a case of maybe I imagined it. Something was in that room with me. I just didn't get a chance to look at his face. Suddenly, the room started to feel hot and suffocating, like there were a lot of people crowding around me. I bolted for the door. I figured I'd just chill in the lobby, even if it meant sleeping there. As I opened the door, the radio turned on by itself again, spewing the same static as earlier. But this time, there was no voice reciting numbers. I ignored it. I grabbed my key card and walked out. I was half running to the elevator. I don't know how many times I pressed on the elevator button just to get it open. The elevator arrived. I stepped in and pressed the door close button. But for some reason, the doors were closing incredibly slow, painfully slow. And then suddenly, the elevator dipped slightly. Like, you know how when somebody, maybe of a bigger size, stepped in the elevator? Like something heavy had just stepped in with me. Oh no. Once the door finally closed, I stood all the way at the back, leaning against the wall. My thinking was, at least if something tried to mess with me, it won't come from behind, right? I don't know what logic that was, but when you are scared, everything you do is pure instinct, right? Then, before I even reached the lobby, the elevator door suddenly opened again. But this time, on the 9th floor, I felt a wave of relief. I thought someone must have pressed the button from outside, so probably they are heading down too. But when the doors opened, there was no one there. And suddenly this stench of smell, it smelled like a urine right outside the elevator, like someone had peed there. I quickly stepped forward and mashed the door close button over and over and over again, but the doors refused to close. I was panicking. How do I get out? Do I get out or do I stay inside? Every hair on my body was standing on end. I felt something behind me again. And then, once more, I felt the same sensation of someone covering my ears from behind. That was it. I didn't think twice. I ran out of the elevator. At the end of the hallway, there was an emergency staircase. I burst through the door and ran down the stairs. From 9th floor? From 9th floor, I ran all the way to the lobby. When I reached the lobby, I flung the door open, half expecting it to be locked actually, but luckily it wasn't. Everything in the lobby looked normal. I was like thanking God. People walking around, hotel staff at their desk, even guests sitting in a cafe. I slumped into one of the sofas. My phone, wallet was still in the room. I was in total disarray. I had a meeting in the morning. I should have been asleep an hour ago. I thought of switching hotels, but I had to go back and grab my stuff first, right? At least. Then I had an idea. I called over a housekeeping staff and told him I left my key card in the room. He then went and informed his supervisor, who gave him the master key and told him to go up with me. In the elevator, the housekeeping guy was totally quiet. I thought, please don't let this guy get possessed or something. I tried making small talk, asking him a couple of questions, normal questions like, how long have you been working here? Where did he stay? How did he find this job so far? And things like that, He replied in Sabahan accent, which is totally normal, but it was very, very short. Maybe he was just not much of a talker. When we got into my room, he unlocked the door and was about to walk off. I asked him to wait outside for a bit and I told him I'd tip him. So he stayed there, holding the door open. I rushed in, quickly packed my stuff and darted out. He didn't ask me anything or even look surprised at how panicked I was. Until we were walking to the elevator. Then he asked me, Bang, abang sudah kena kah? Which translated to, did something already get to you, bro? At that point, I was kind of like confused, angry, and confused. What do you mean something get to me? I thought he was messing with me, but seeing my face, which was clearly a mix of anger and confusion, he began to tell me about the hotel. Apparently, the hotel was notoriously haunted. Lots of people, locals, Westerners, Chinese, Koreans, all sorts of people from all sorts of walk of life had complained about disturbances at night. Some walked in and saw a woman with messy hair lying on the bed. Others saw an old lady standing in the shower. Some heard knocks on the window. Others experienced TVs turning on and off on their own, but with the power point unplugged. But he had never heard of any dark history involving the hotel. The building was relatively new, not some old colonial place. His guess, maybe the land of the hotel was built on something unclean, like maybe there was an old burial ground or something underneath. After hearing his story, I complained like mad to the hotel manager. Of course, I didn't mention the staff member who told me all of that. At first, the manager refused to give me a refund. So I pulled a netizen card. If you don't refund me, you know what? This is going to go viral. I'm going to post in all the social medias that I know and I'm going to make sure your hotel get it. I threatened him, arrogantly. Still, not a single cent was refunded. Luckily, I didn't pay for the room myself, but switching hotels meant I have to pay upfront first before getting reimbursed later. Claims take forever. I'm sure some of us could relate to this. After this, I told myself I'm not going on work trips anymore unless I have family or friends nearby, which I can stay with them. That's my story. Sure, I didn't see a ghost standing right in front of me in like other stories, but for me, this was scary as hell. Till this day, I still have phobia of elevators. Fellow listeners, that is for tonight's story. You don't always need to see a ghost to know you have been haunted. Sometimes it's the static in the radio, the weight in the air, and the overwhelming sense that something is standing right behind you. Once again, thank you very much for joining me on tonight's episode of Creepy with Coffee. If you have enjoyed this story, once again, if you have yet to do so, please help me subscribe, share this story out, and also, if you are kind enough, please do leave some comments. Until the next time, stay alert, stay safe, and don't trust the silence. Sometimes it's never really empty.